Do you think it's important to have a dedicated atheist community, or should atheists focus on banding around other more practical topics like we were talking
Yeah.
about, reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights? What about apostate communities?
I used to not think it was important. I used to think that all it is that we should be honest with ourselves, and then we can go about our business. And there are far more pressing problems than whether or not an atheist is legally allowed to serve on a jury in Maryland, or whether or not an atheist can join the Boy Scouts. So I did not take atheism as a cause on its own. And in a way, I still don't. But I do think that the more we find one another across the country and make it clear to the country as a whole that there are a lot of us, and that we share a perspective on the universe, but also on the importance of this separation of church and state, and the necessity of keeping religion out of our lives. I think I'm feeling more than I ever have, like building that community is an important thing in and of itself.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful also, and I feel like this about a lot of political movements. I'm hopeful that there'll be a point when it won't be important at all.
Right.
I'm hopeful, like
the purpose of every nonprofit group is to put itself out of business.
Absolutely. I'm hopeful, the way I'm hopeful that at some point we won't need women's studies departments.
Right.
At some point we won't have to make the incredibly obvious and yet incredibly important point that Black Lives Matter. Like, at some point that'll just be a given.
Right.
And I
feel go to this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I feel so. That's how I feel. Like, in this moment, in this country, yeah, we need to make this community. Once we're Scandinavia, we're fine.
Right. To get to the question about apostate communities and all that stuff, like I do find there to be a lot of value when you could find other people who share your very specific concerns. So if that means you're an ex-Muslim and you want to gather, there's value to that. If you're an atheist, it may seem in a lot of places that there are more pressing issues, like you mentioned. Right. On the other hand, if you live in the Bible Belt or a really red community, you may find a lot of value in finding a group that is just for atheists. But at the same time, even in more liberal areas, there is value, maybe not in finding an atheist group necessarily, but finding a group that shares your values on civil rights, women's rights, things like that. So I do find them important. I can speak for me personally here. I don't necessarily need an atheist community like I may have needed to in the past. But there are other issues I care about that are more pressing, and I would absolutely support and join. And same is true for anyone. I care very little about what groups you join. I just wish people cared about stuff. And I find that apathy bothers me a lot more than a lot of these other things.
And I really do think that's why the data that I found about the fact that atheists are so politically active, but that the general group nuns is not, is really significant. These are people who know themselves, who will declare themselves, and who have a definite view on the universe, and that urges them toward political action.
Let me ask one final question here. When did you realize that you didn't believe? What was the gap between realizing that and sharing that openly? And was there a further gap between sharing it to activism?
I was raised a Reform Jew in a very loving family, and we celebrated Shabbat almost every Friday night, and I was bat mitzvah. My sisters were bat mitzvah. I don't remember ever believing that the Old Testament God, to whom I offered songs of praise and prayer, at every sort of religious opportunity, I never believed, as far as I can remember, that that was an actual being. I guess I always thought of him as a character, an invention, and that's partly maybe because I grew up in a very literary family. My father is an English professor, a Shakespeare professor. We read a ton, and he just seemed like an incredible character. Um, However, I never said to myself, even, this means I'm an atheist. And there were many times that I detail, many things I'm embarrassed about now, where I sort of consciously misled other people, made them think that I believed more than I did, or certainly hesitated to tell the truth about myself. And when that changed for me was when I had children, because I had this sort of horrible, wonderful realization that I was responsible for everything they knew about the world. My husband and I, obviously, but I mean that when they're little, you're just the portal for all knowledge, from the smallest thing to the biggest thing. And that was the moment where I said, "Well, I can't pass along these things that I don't really believe. I can't teach them to my kids. I'm going to have to teach them what I truly believe." Now, from there to I'm comfortable telling people outside my home took a little longer, because, as I said, I really like the idea that people like me, and I really like to have pleasant conversations. And when you're a young parent, um, you crave, new friends and other parents, and you're really trying to build that community. And so the idea of saying I was an atheist, which, as far as I knew, was something that was going to really turn people off, or make them either not like me or think that I couldn't possibly like them. I was nervous to do that. Um, Eventually, your kids get older, they get smarter, they realize that you're not necessarily behaving the way that you should. And so, again, they kind of continued to push me, not necessarily by saying anything, but just because I wanted to model good behavior for them, and I wanted to change the world a little bit for them, and make it a place where you could say what you believe, and with no stigma or repercussions. So that was the
I like
journey,
it.
and it's in the book, and it's
Can you
there's
tell
yeah.
us where to find the book? Tell us about the title, and
All
tell us where
right.
we can
It's
find it.
called We of Little Faith: Why I Stopped Pretending to Believe, and Maybe You Should Too. And it's available, everywhere, all the normal book places, beginning October 3rd. I think some of them are out now. You can go to my website, and I have the links to Amazon and bookshop.org. You can call your local bookstore and order it. And you can also ask your library to order it. I'm really into that, because I love
No,
libraries. I wrote it in a
use them while they're
library.
still around.
Yeah, they are the most amazing places. So call your library or fill out that online form and get them to order it. And then not just you can read it, but other people can read it too.
Yeah, it's not just a good book. I
Mhm.
come across a lot of these books just doing what I do. This one's actually good, and it's actually one I would suggest you can give to like religious friends, and they're not going to be mad at you about it. It makes an excellent gift. So, Kate,
Oh,
thank you
good.
so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you to all the commenters for your questions, and we'll see you next time.